Hi and welcome to the channel. This is a long-term review of Ltwoo eRX Chinese electronic group set. This bike is one that I put together in the first half of 2024 and I've ridden it quite a lot since then. And at this point I've done about just over 7,000 kilometers on it, so it's seen a fair bit of use. Now the frame is Chinese, and not the first Chinese frame I've built a bike from, but in this build I leaned into the Chinese theme a bit more and kind of surprised myself by buying Ltwoo ER9 to be precise, electronic group set. And Ltwoo is a Chinese manufacturer, not really well known at all in the West, but I noticed that they had one of several Chinese manufacturers beginning to put out electronic group sets. So the Ltwoo eRX group set is wireless from the shifters to the mechanisms, but the mechanisms, the front and rear derailleur, are wired into a battery in the seat post. And as to why I bought the Ltwoo kit, well, one is I'm kind of curious about what's out there in the market, and everyone's got Shimano or SRAM, so I thought I wouldn't mind it being a bit different to that. And the second point, can't ignore, is it was pretty cheap. And although I think the parts are well made and they're holding up well to the use that I have given them, and apologies for looking a bit grubby, but yes, I do ride this bike, I wouldn't say they're going to win awards for industrial elegance as such. They're more functional than pretty. Here's the rear derailleur. As is common on modern rear derailleurs, it can handle quite a big cassette sprocket. Not sure what the maximum is actually. This is a 34, but I've got a feeling it would go bigger. Now, because this group is semi-wireless in that the front and rear mechanisms are hardwired to a battery in the seat post, and they're not carrying a battery on the derailleur, as is the modern trend, it does make them a bit less bulky, I think, than the equivalents from, let's say, SRAM and probably future equivalents from Shimano. Although I'm calling this a Chinese group set, it's not quite as full a group set as the main manufacturers produce. Ltwoo still don't have their own chain set. So this one chain set I'm using is from another manufacturer on AliExpress, a carbon chain set from Riro. It's held up pretty well. Though looking at it now in this bright sunlight, I see it's looking slightly scuffed. As price is obviously a factor here, in that we think of Chinese bike components as being so far pretty cheap. I'll say that this group set ER9 cost me £375. That was for the shifters, front and rear mechanisms, brake calipers and battery holder. And then there was another £130 for the carbon chain set. So the group set here looking at about £500 in total. The hydraulic brake calipers are pretty unremarkable, kind of standard units. They take Shimano style disc brake pads. The only thing is that Ltwoo have got a slightly clunky mounting system, which you can see here with the little adapter marked front and a separate one marked rear. It enables them to use the same caliper design for both front and rear. Here's the rear brake caliper, this time with the rear mount adapter. And I've got a different disc brake pad in here. This is the actual OEM pad from Ltwoo, which they call their breakfast roll pad. They're pretty cheap, they're organic pads, they work very well. This iteration of the Ltwoo ER9 eRX group set I'm using, Ltwoo called version 1. In version 1, the charging is done to the rear derailleur. Let me just point at the charging port here. It's a little magnetic coupling which they supply as part of the kit, which can be kind of plugged into a standard mobile phone charger wall socket or just from a power bank, which is pretty convenient actually. As I've been using this stuff for a year, it's fair to say I really like it and I get on very well with it. I think it's well made. One of the things I like about it is the rubber mouldings for the hoods have stayed in really good condition. The front and rear shifting is very good. It's light and efficient and it just works. The app that comes with Ltwoo is pretty good, and among other things, it lets you fine-tune the position of the kind of derailleur on each gear if there's some sprocket is being a little bit sticky. Via the app, the transmission can also be tuned to cover different cassette types, anything from 9, 10, 11, 12, perhaps even 13 speed. I have it set up as 12 speed. Obviously everything hasn't been perfect. These buttons for going up and down the cassette have got a really light action, and to begin with I would ride with my hands resting here, but just going over a bump would be enough to kind of click the button and make me change gear. So I slightly keep my fingers away from the shifting buttons now when I'm not going to use them. Another thing that happened, and this is quite a strange one, unexpected, the charging lead failed. Now you wouldn't think that something as simple as a charging lead could fail, but it's got some electronics in it. It gives you an LED indication of whether it's charging or it has finished charging. I was able to charge the batteries for the units, because they're just kind of standardized batteries, externally to the bike and put them back into the battery holder, and the system still wouldn't work, which I found very puzzling. It was only when I actually bought a new charge cable, which was very cheap, that the system sprang back into life. So I guess in a way it was a combination of a cheap thing failing and me not fully understanding the importance of that charging lead to bringing the system back to life. One other annoying thing which has happened on a few times on rare occasions is if I've selected to go to a bigger sprocket at the rear to select a lower gear, the derailleur has swung all the way to the biggest inner sprocket, giving me a much lower gear than I had expected. And the strange aspect of that is it seems to have only occurred in cold weather. Just to explain about their two range offerings, they offer eRX and eR9. They are functionally identical. eRX has some carbon parts, whereas eR9 is all aluminium. I've been featuring here the Ltwoo eRX eR9 version 1, which is slightly out of date now. They have released a version 3. Charging is now direct to the front derailleur via USB-C, and the button action on the levers has become a bit further, and there are other changes. Fundamentally, my experience of riding this bike with the Ltwoo Groupset has been very positive. I love riding this bike, it's fast and responsive, and the gears and brakes do exactly what I need them to do. And I'm enjoying exploring components that remain relatively unknown in the West. For now, while few people have knowledge or experience with this kit, the Chinese company's value proposition is mainly around low prices. But Chinese bike tech is progressing fast, and those companies have a huge internal market to sustain them. I think the existing Groupset brands may begin to feel the competition from China. I have no affiliation or connection with Ltwoo. I've bought these parts on my own money, and this video is simply intended to explain my experience with Ltwoo electronic shifting. Thanks for watching, and keep cycling!